The panel of today is Humanitarian Same, Reset or Dispatch. What does fit for purpose look like is the subject of our panel. And a brief abstract is the diminishing political support for the aid agenda and basic humanitarian principles signals already that we have likely passed the peak of humanitarian aid. 10 years ago, when the Grand Bargain was introduced at the World Humanitarian Summit in Turkey, our sector was already struggling to remain effective. Today, after 10 years, I cannot say that the situation is any better. Cuts, stop work, downsize, scale down, close are the words that we hear more often. Cutting funds, cutting access, cutting electricity, cutting water, cutting relations, those are cuts that we hear every morning. Hard to remember when was the last time we got some good news. When it comes to the broader system we are in, words like rethink, reimagine, reform are not new things we hear as well. But we challenge ourselves with these words, and do we remain with the status quo? Is this why we got where we are today? Resetting the system means facing uncomfortable truths, making difficult decisions, acting quickly, all with an uncertain environment. Or is this principled humanitarian action becoming a thing of past? So what does all this mean for now and the coming years? We will discuss and break it down with my panelists. In this open and interactive session, we will hear from humanitarian leaders from around the world, from different organizations, both from United Nations, Red Cross, Red Crescent World, NGOs, INGOs. We have networks as well. So it's quite an impactful mix of panelists we have. And the questions I will ask to my panelists are, what does the changing landscape mean? How are your organizations adapting? What are the opportunities there? And what should be prioritized and what should be let go? These are my questions, but please, we want you to join and challenge our panelists with more questions that you may have and share your thoughts. Before I go to my panelists, allow me to invite Mr. Louis Hoffman for a keynote address. Louis is the Senior Coordinator on Solutions for the IOM's Department of Humanitarian Response and Recovery. He just concluded a 2-year loan to the United Nations Secretariat as Senior Advisor to the Office of Special Advisor on IDP Solutions, where he supported a UN-wide policy and reform process on solutions to internal displacement. He brings 25 years of experience within IOM and many more to say about Louis, but please, the floor is yours, Louis.
Thanks very much. Let me begin by thanking Sphere and William Anderson for the invitation to speak with you today. I'd also like to recognize the leadership of Sphere Board Chairman Alper from the Turkish Red Crescent and the Humanitarian Standard Partners, whose efforts in setting standards for life-saving assistance continues to anchor our shared commitment to dignity in emergencies. It's also a privilege to share the stage with my fellow panelists here who are going to bring thought leadership and some dimension to our topic today. And I'd like to quickly welcome all the participants joining us today. This is a very timely discussion. We're meeting at a pivotal moment when questions about how we operate, who we serve, and whether our systems are fit for purpose have never been more urgent. I was around at the outset of the clusters in around 2004, and I can't remember since then a more, in a sense, tumultuous period, but one that is leaning very directly toward change. We have to look today at how the prospect of rapid and substantial change may shape the future of our humanitarian system. On March 10th, the UN Emergency Relief Coordinator, Tom Fletcher, issued a letter to the principals of the Interagency Standing Committee, setting out a process to achieve 3 strategic priorities. 1, the best response with the resources that we have. 2, urgent work to reform and reimagine how we work. And third, a shift in power to humanitarian leaders at the country level and to the people that we serve. And all this, mind you, through a lighter, more nimble coordination structure. This letter, as you'd imagine, has kicked off substantial lines of work and serious reflection about reform. There has perhaps been some panic in this process, alongside some good debate and dialogue. Change is afoot, unmistakably across the system. Amidst this, I couldn't help thinking to myself about that oft-repeated phrase, that consistent refrain, to do more with less. Many of us in the humanitarian sector will recognize this sort of call to action, always cognizant of unmet needs and the threat of broken promises in the face of diminishing resources. But we're asked to consider these three elements today: the challenge of reset, same, or dispatch. And this is much more complex than do more with less. This is now the moment to look at what we can do differently, what we need to keep or hang on to, and what we need to leave behind as we redefine our mission to save lives and alleviate suffering. As tumultuous as recent months have been, driven principally by deep funding cuts across the system, it's timely and actually a bit exciting to be here having this discussion. In his letter, the ERC has established a multi-track process to drive new ideas and quick action toward a reformed, more efficient, and less costly humanitarian aid architecture. Across the UN system, civil society and academia, the humanitarian leadership and the community at large are seized with meeting this challenge. I expect our discussions today will add to these reflections. Before we touch on same, reset, or dispatch, our themes for this morning, perhaps a few words on the context, the all too real substance of what we're discussing. If what we hear daily on the news isn't enough, our growing aid budgets and beneficiary rosters tell us clearly that the scale and the complexity of humanitarian needs are growing. Internal displacement figures reached an estimated 75.9 million in 2023, described by IDMC as the tip of the iceberg. Climate disasters and conflicts are increasing in both frequency and intensity. The World Bank estimates that more than 200 million more people will be displaced by climate change by 2050. In Sudan, the crisis with the largest displacement in the world, nearly 2/3 of the population are in dire need of humanitarian assistance, including 16 million children. With famine conditions worsening, acute food insecurity at historic levels, and severe access constraints, women and girls are at extreme risk of conflict-related sexual violence, and more than 12.1 million people require specialized services. From Gaza to Myanmar, Ukraine to DRC, we see compounding levels of humanitarian need and greater risks and challenges to meeting those needs. We can't go on here without noting that still, our system has innovated. And even where colleagues have given their lives, we seek and we find ways to advocate, to work against the odds, and to deliver. In Ethiopia, we've been struck by the ingenuity of local NGOs establishing out-of-camp drop-in centers to serve displaced people living in host communities. Rather than confining services to traditional camp settings, these organizations are working hand in hand with affected populations, ensuring they receive the same level of information and support through a more flexible, community-driven approach. This shift is not just innovative, it's transformative, offering a model of assistance that is more adaptable, inclusive, and attuned to the realities of displacement today. We know we can adapt. We know we can deliver better. To do so, we are facing up to the criticisms that have emerged consistently, really, over the past decade, that are taking on a new urgency in this day of limited resourcing. The system, our beloved system, remains disjointed, slow to respond, and at times disconnected from those we serve. And over the years, our scope has expanded far beyond our capacities. These are the pressures we face and the things that sit at the core of how we will define fit for purpose in the days ahead. In facing up to these pressures for change, for reform, it's timely to consider what we must keep, what we must seek to do differently, and what we'll need to leave behind from our current practice. Immutably, at the core of what we must keep, and so very relevant to our organizers today, are, of course, our principles and our standards. Our commitment to change must be girded by our continued commitment to humanitarian principles, to core standards that ensure dignity amidst crisis, to protection priorities, and international humanitarian law. As these serve the foundation of our collective action to save lives and alleviate suffering, they must also provide the foundation for what lies ahead in a reformed, and reimagined mission. Many of us are familiar with some of the standards, the humanitarian standards handbooks, such as the minimum standards in camp management, championed by the CCCM cluster, which offers us a roadmap for accountability. These standards place participation of affected populations at the forefront, ensuring that humanitarian actors remain answerable to the communities they serve. The principles outlined in the Humanitarian Charter, the right to life with dignity, the right to assistance, and the right to protection, must guide our response. Now, beyond the clarity of our principles and standards, which are the more immutable elements of our system, I can only offer some thoughts, some suggestions about the reset and the dispatch, when what we must keep the same is clear. Where the system will take the discussion on the reset and the dispatch in the coming weeks is very hard to predict at the moment. But in advance of our panel discussion, I can try to offer some food for thought. On the reset, much is already under discussion about how we will need to reframe coordination to be more efficient with greater field impact. If we are to reshape our cluster system, how will we achieve efficiencies and greater impact without dispatching the tremendous amount of guidance, the operational standards, the expertise, the training material, the best practice, all the learning that has been achieved over the past 20 years? As we reset, we have to be clear about the incredible value of what's been built up across our cluster coordination system and how we can keep this at the center of our reform. We will need to improve what we've started on localization, on improving accountability, in more effectively pursuing the nexus of humanitarian action and development investment. In this, we will need to listen more and effectively engage our beneficiaries. To improve alignment between humanitarian action and early recovery processes, we will need more substantive engagement and, in some cases, capacity support for our host government counterparts. In deliberations on this reset, we must be creative and thoughtful. And now, to be dispatched. As the ERC has said, this means stopping work that we've invested in and that we know matters. This may be the most difficult of our deliberations, yet we know many of the things that hinder us that we will need to leave behind. Our competitiveness, the competition for resources, for leadership, for the sake of mandates, and at the risk of operational effectiveness. We will need to break down silos, those places where we sometimes keep our data and where we keep some of the most important know-how out of the reach from partner networks, from joint assessment processes, and too distant from processes that would better empower local actors and local systems. The dispatch will require uniquely honest reflections and conversations within and between agencies and organizations, as well as with our donors. The dispatch will most certainly necessitate concessions across the system, and we have to prepare for this. Today, we have a host of questions for our panelists to prompt more reflection on the humanitarian reset and to help us elaborate what we must change, what we must keep, and what we will need to leave behind out of a reformed humanitarian system. I thank you again for the time, and I look forward to the discussions and especially the chance to influence the days ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this inspiring, open, but bold and important critical statements and highlights that you made, realities that we need to face when we talk about reset, reform. We're all in your impactful statement. I would really love to elaborate that 5-10 minutes, but I will try to use the time in the best efficient way. We would be grateful if you can stay with us throughout the panel. We will try to finish on time. I know everyone has commitments, but let me go to my panelists. You highlighted much what ERC has been saying over the past few weeks, so allow me to start with my first panelist, who is from UNOCHA. Then I will connect these ERC highlights to Gemma, and I will have one coming question to all my panelists. Actually, first round will be that. So I will try not to repeat the questions as I go over my panelists, but the question will be on how do you perceive the evolving landscape of principled humanitarian action, particularly regarding, for example, dignity, cash transfers, and the localization of assistance? What key changes are you seeing? Is my question to my panelists. So let me introduce Gemma Connell. Gemma is from UNOCHA. She is the Chief of Assessment, Planning and Monitoring Branch of the UNOCHA, a UN organization that I served previously in my career as well, so I feel dear and near to the work of OCHA as well. She has not just only served long time in field offices of OCHA, she led regional, sub-regional offices of UNOCHA, but also worked in sudden onset and complex emergencies around the world. But more importantly, maybe to today's topic, she has been actively involved in the humanitarian reform processes, and including the ISSC Transformative Agenda, Interagency Standing Committee Transformative Agenda. So, Gemma, the floor is yours. How do you think it looks like?
Just a small question. Thank you so much, Alper, and great to be with everyone here. I want to talk about a couple of things really grounded in this question of principled humanitarian action, and I think building on a lot of what Louis has kicked us off with, in terms of the big challenges that we're faced with, and also some of the dilemmas as we go into this period ahead. The first observation I have is that when I came back to headquarters just a year and a half ago, the way that people spoke about principled humanitarian action was completely foreign to me. Why? Because it had, over the years, somehow been taken from a holistic approach to what principled humanitarian action looks like to a very narrow concept that principled humanitarian action somehow means we have to assess the needs of everyone, everywhere, all the time. Literally, that it's about just needs assessment. And that, for me, was truly stunning, because principled humanitarian action, as we all know, is much, much bigger than that. The second realization that was quite shocking for me was that the piece around impartiality had, over the years, shifted from a real grounding in the concept of non-discrimination. And I want to come back to this question of non-discrimination as pertains to dehumanization, because that's something that I think is one of the most fundamental things that we're seeing in the world today. But it had shifted from non-discrimination to, again, this needs-based response coming first. Whereas if you look at the initial articulation of impartiality, it's about non-discrimination, one. Number two, it's about really critically meeting the most urgent needs. That's at the core. The original articulation of the principle of impartiality is meeting the most urgent needs. So why do I reflect this back to you? Because I think this is one of the biggest challenges we face in this moment. As a humanitarian system, we've grown dramatically. If you look at the growth financial, if you look at the growth in terms of the scope of what we were doing, over these last years, it has been absolutely massive. And we now face a moment where we don't have the option of continuing with that trajectory of growth. Whether we thought it was a good thing or a bad thing, it is not an option. So as has been said, I think a couple of pieces here. You'll see in the humanitarian reset this concept around how do we really save the most lives? That's what we were created to do as humanitarians. Now, in the interim, we've done a lot more, and that's been very, very important, and it's not to in any way disavow the importance of that. But I've been looking at a lot of data these past weeks, and one of the things that really strikes me is that we have been responding least in the places where people are most likely to die. Now, that's not to say we weren't trying. It's not to say that we, wanted to respond in the places where there was less severe need. Most of the places where people are most likely to die are the most active conflict zones, face the most intense access constraints, have the most bureaucratic hurdles to reach people, are controlled by non-state armed groups who may or may not respect us, are the places where our colleagues are most likely to be injured or killed. But nevertheless, we have to ask ourselves, does that mean that we are delivering on our mandate as humanitarians if we're responding more in the places where the needs are less severe? And this is, I think, a real piece around the humanitarian reset of how do we reorientate ourselves around the places where people are most likely to die and deliver the best possible response to those people. Because the second piece to this is, what do we consider to be a response? As OCHA, we count how many people did we reach last year with humanitarian assistance. That could be anything from you received a toothbrush at some point in the year to you received a comprehensive response over the course of the year. But when we actually look at reach and you start to dig into those figures, we've reached far fewer people meaningfully than we've reached with something at some point over the course of the year. So how do we, as a system, now really reorientate ourselves around Are we reaching the people whose lives are literally the most at risk with the best quality response? And I promise I'm nearly done. Just a couple of additional points on this. Number one, life-saving does not, must not, should not mean deliver a bad response. Life-saving means deliver the most appropriate response to stop the person from dying, to meet the life-threatening needs. If that means you dig a borehole, because I've heard so many people these last weeks say, life-saving means you're just going to do water trucking. No, it doesn't. You can meet the life-threatening need for clean water with a borehole. You don't have to meet it by water trucking. You can meet the life-threatening need for food with emergency agriculture. You don't need to meet it with in-kind food assistance, and you can, I know Kate will speak much more to this, I hope, meet those life-threatening needs with multi-purpose cash that enables people to choose how to meet their most life-threatening needs. You can do all of that, and it's life-saving. So let's not allow ourselves to see life-saving as a bad word. Saving lives is life-saving. That is life-saving. How we save those lives is up to us, is up to the communities to tell us how we do it. So let's assume that life-saving is bad response. Life-saving is to save lives in the best possible way with the resources that we have in that moment. So going back to the principles, reorientating ourselves around this question of urgency, around a most acute need, reorientating ourselves around non-discrimination, because what we see across the globe is that the communities who we serve are dehumanized. And we see that most acutely in crises today, where we see mass atrocities unfolding every single day that our colleagues are witnessing, that our colleagues themselves are killed by. How do we use our work to not rehumanize, because no one ever lost their humanity. The world lost the ability to see it in the people who we serve. But how do we really center people's humanity? And I challenge us on this, because I think we've become so obsessed with numbers, so obsessed with data, so obsessed with counting, that we've forgotten the people who are at the core of the work that we do. So how do we orient ourselves around people? And my last comment is a really controversial one, but I want to put it out there because of the moment that we find ourselves in. And this is not about the humanitarian reset, but it is about principles. I, like several others who I see in this room, worked in Gaza at some point over the last year and a half. And I think every single one of us who worked in Gaza over this last year and a half witnessed atrocities that are unimaginable. And our colleagues who've been in Sudan during this period have seen the same thing. And I want to share with you, because it carries some of the words that we throw around in the humanitarian principles in a very different light. A quote, I spent a lot of last year reading two reports. One is the independent investigation on Rwanda, and the second is the Secretary General's report on the fall of Srebrenica. And I know we're all short on time, but if you have time, I encourage you to read them. They were issued within just a couple of weeks of each other. And this is a quote from the report on the Rwandan genocide. There can be no neutrality in the face of genocide, no impartiality in the face of a campaign to exterminate part of a population. And as we move forward as humanitarians, I think we have to learn the lessons of history and challenge ourselves as to what humanitarianism looks like in an age of mass atrocity. Thank you so much.
Well said on all, but particularly on the last one, how we should not confuse our neutrality principle with many others that we think neutrality is. Thank you for that. And you mentioned something that is what ERC has been saying these few days as well. When we talk about cuts and stops, he refers to stopping well. And what you mentioned is, if we do life-saving, it doesn't mean we respond bad, but do well as well. Stop well, and then if you do well, is what you highlighted. Thank you, Gemma. Now, allow me to go from blue family to red family a little bit, and I have my friend and old friend Mamdouh Tello. And Mamdouh is from Canadian Red Cross, now based in Montreal, and is National Program Specialist for Recovery Services at Canadian Red Cross. Over 10 years ago, it was two of us floating planes in Gaziantep for the early days of Syria crisis.
Exactly. This is 0 point.
Mamdouh is a SEAL trainer as well for long years now. Mamdouh, much to say about you, but over to you for the same question. How, from a Red Cross Representative member perspective, how it looks like?
Yeah, thank you so much. I will not repeat what Gima said, some of like the humanitarian principles and how we are adhering these principles in our new look shape for the humanitarian reset. But I will highlight about how we should consider again of the changes that happened against the IHL, International Humanitarian Law, and the breaking that happened the last like 20 years, how the breaking happened, and the humanitarian worker, how they are targeted, how many people like killed during the operations. It's something really to be like considered how we are talking now about our humanitarian new shape. How we need to think to adhere these principles about all the regulations, all the laws that we have, international humanitarian law. It's something really adhering me also how we're working in the field, and we are really insist about it is the safe access and the lack of access to reach the people in need, and we need to make life savings, but sometimes we lose our lives to reach the people who need to save their lives, which is our centered beneficiary, always our centers in our approaches, but usually we don't have access to reach them, which is really affect us. Also, we need to think about the logistics issues when we are talking about the humanitarian reset. I met Albert in the 0 points. We were working together for Syria response, and which is like we are trying always to reduce the bureaucracy to how we can work, how we can receiving the aid and send it to the people in need in the north of Syria. In very efficient way, but it's always taking like some of political decisions from the foreign donors to send it to Turkey. Then the Turkey facilitated with us to send it to Syria. It's very big problem we are facing, how we are facilitating our logistics and securing the efficient methodology, or working on efficient methodology to reach out the people in need in timely manner. One of the things I would like to talk about the humanitarian risk and what the changes that happening in the landscape. It's about the cash transfer, and I work in many crises around the world, and even now in Canada I'm working for the domestics crisis or domestic responses. We always have a problem in the cash transfer and delivering the money for the people, even in the Hawala system or in the transfer system or in the banking systems. I think it's really to be considered in the future how we can meet these needs and how we can transfer to save their dignity, and also to make it like less transparent process with the transferring money, but at the same time not taking a long time to the approvals and coming to the beneficiary pockets. And always the donors after they said, oh, cash transfer, no, we need something more secure, but this is the most important things for any beneficiaries. Last things I will consider, and I will not talk more because I know the time we have here, it's the complexity of any crisis. It's now taking long time till any crisis finish or moving from emergency side to the recovery stages. like what happened in Sudan, Syria, Yemen, Gaza, Ukraine. It's a very complex crisis, taking a lot of like changes happening, climate change, the military side, the humanitarian charters, the political inputs. So many things happened for the crisis, will taking long time, and sometimes we are not meeting the people in needs directly, so will be affecting in our systems, sure. So this is what I would like to highlight about some of changes happen in the ground of humanitarian, and also I'm just really insist with what the Gema said about the humanitarian principles and how we are designing our programs, our operations, and how we are adhering these principles. Thank you so much.
Thank you. 17 years in humanitarian sector. I can't remember a complex crisis that started in the 17 years and ended, like except the natural disasters that we have seen. Anything that I remember started in this period of time is still there as a protracted crisis in front of us. So exactly, as you say, crisis for us is just increasing in numbers and complexity. And you mentioned a lot about cash, and let me connect from your cash remarks to a cash network. Kate Turton is with us. Kate is a passionate development and humanitarian professional leading CALP network today with 30 years of experience leading teams which have developed evidence-based policy, advocated for change, and delivered large-scale complex program portfolios. Prior to joining CALP in 2024, she has led a range of executive and non-executive roles in the public, private, and third sector, including DFID, and then overseeing part of the FCDO's convergence. Kate, as a network, as an enabler, as a network lead, how do you think our world looks like?
Many thanks. And it's always really embarrassing, isn't it, when someone reads back your CV because it's going to think about me. But yeah, thanks so much, and thanks for sharing with us today. I wanted to maybe
Obviously talk a bit more about cash. And I think my starting point really is that we feel that cash is the fundamental and the cornerstone of the reset that we're looking for. I think it speaks to many of the issues that Gemma outlined there. We all know that it is what people prefer, it's the way they prefer to receive support, it empowers them to make the choices that that fit them best. But I think it goes a lot beyond that. And I think why I think we are so passionate about cash being at the center of this reset is for three real reasons. Firstly, we know it's more efficient, it's quicker, it's faster, it's fundamental to a more efficient response that can reach more people with less. It's also, I think, really interesting to see how we are managing to get cash into really difficult places. I think we've always had this challenge in terms of thinking it's too hard to do cash in Sudan, it's too hard to do cash in Gaza, it's too hard to do cash in Afghanistan. It's really not. We can do cash in really difficult places. And the advances in technology and all the kind of progress on that side of things means that we can do cash more safely, more securely, and that's only going to improve. So I think that's another kind of really important thing for us to bear in mind. So it's what people want, it's more efficient, and we can reach really difficult places with cash. And so I feel it has to be, I think, the starting point for the reset. I think it's really concerning as CALP. We've been kind of obviously making really great progress in terms of cash as part of humanitarian response. Many of you will know we've seen that rapid scale up, reaching almost a quarter of international humanitarian aid by 2023. But really, I think alarmingly, our kind of latest data is showing that actually we're slipping back and probably going from around almost a quarter of international humanitarian assistance delivered in cash, probably slipping back to around 17-18% in 2024, and that is before the impact of the US aid actions and cuts. So we will see that slip further. We'll see it slip further in terms of cash volumes that are reaching people in need, and we'll see it slip back further in terms of the proportion of international humanitarian response that's delivered in cash. And that's extremely concerning for all the reasons, because that I outlined in terms of why cash is a quality life-saving response.
So, I mean, why is that? We've been reflecting on this, and I think there's two or three things I think on our minds. One is, I think we're really worried that the humanitarian system had almost gone as far as it could in terms of cash. It's almost a sense that we had reached peak cash in terms of the humanitarian system, the way it's funded, the way it functions, and with all the kind of various kind of bureaucracies, politics in play. We'd probably gone as far as we could in terms of getting cash up to around quarter of international aid delivered in cash. So I guess our real concern at the moment is trying to think about how do we sort of step away from that system, and which I think has taken us some way, but now won't take us the next step, and think about how we might do cash differently, in a more lighter, more agile way, in a more direct way. How do we crowd in more different types of financing? How do we put in place more effective delivery models, streamlined delivery models? And really importantly, how do we create a local responder interface of national actors, of community actors, that we can really, as a system, dock into and ensure that then cash reaches those most in need, and really reaches those vulnerable groups that have potentially been excluded in the past that Gemma talks to. So I think there's a lot of thinking from us to do about what that kind of new system might look like, Cash 2.0 in a sense. But I think we feel confident about finding this new system, this kind of messy system, I think, that will emerge from this, because we're already seeing it in practice. We see very different cash delivery responses across the global network of responses, and that's not a surprise. There's never one size fits all. So the kind of cash delivery that we're seeing, for example, in Myanmar, the cash kind of delivery we're seeing in Sudan right now, the way cash has been delivered throughout the Ukraine response, these responses look really, really different from each other. In some ways, they've stepped a little bit outside the traditional humanitarian system, the coordination structures, the funding, and set themselves up in a slightly different way. And those as I would say, and I think my colleague will speak more to this, but that network of local responders, that network of national and community-based organisations is a fundamental part of this new cash model, and how we dock our global response and our global intent into a local interface that really works for local people and empowering those communities. So there's some elements there. We'd love to do some more thinking around this with all of you, bring this experience to bear, and try and create something that's just a little bit different going forward. As I said, a lighter, more streamlined type of approach. So I think I'll maybe go back to where I started with. I think cash, starting with cash, thinking about how we design and come up with new ideas and new systems around doing cash really well, has to be the way forward, and perhaps can unlock this creative thinking that we need to break free. And then my final reflection, I guess, is to us as the cash community. I feel it's easy to be critical, isn't it, of the system and all the kind of challenges we're seeing against the system. But I think we as the cash community have also kind of got sucked into that. We've also developed a very complex cash model. We've developed complex terminology, multi-purpose cash, sectoral cash. Really, what we're talking about is good quality money for people in need. And we've created a very complex set of guidance around market assessments, needs assessments, minimum expenditure baskets. So I feel we as a cash community have to step back too and take on our shoulders and think through new ideas about how we also become more streamlined and more locally led. So many thanks.
Thank you. Kate, cash is very much in my life day-to-day, in my work as well. And when it comes to cash, if I say two words, and it was in your statement as well, dignity and efficiency. So in this turbulent times, and when we talk about rethinking, reforming, what we want to protect is people's dignity. And what we want to be is more efficient. So it's all in cash. And I think what you said is very much to the point. Thank you so much. I will now go to Jonas Abidman, colleague from Democratic Republic of Congo, from Goma, from a national NGO called BIFRE. He conducts many trainings in leadership and humanitarian response. Jonas has more than 20 years of experience working in several humanitarian organizations. He is a strong advocate and a focal point of Sphere as well. So, Jonas, from your perspective, how do you perceive the evolving landscape? How does it look like? What key changes are you seeing?
Thanks so much. From my experience, I think that the landscape is very challenging depending to the number of years. For example, when you can see the context of DRC, where armed conflict have been registered for more than 20 years, a country with more than 120 armed groups operating at the country level. I think that the number of people who are affected the number is very high. But our first colleague was talking about life saving, what is very well. But for how long? Sometimes we are asking ourselves, for how long are we going to continue saving life of people in the context where funding are reduced, but the needs are very high? I think that when we are talking about humanitarian principles, it's very interesting to see how possible to integrate the use of humanitarian standards, because there are some action to be done for a short time, but also some programs should also be done for a long time. For example, we have displaced people for 3 months, 6 months, who really need to have a response, an emergency response. But some of people have been also displaced for more than 20 years, living in the same context. They need livelihood, for example. They need to develop economic and recovery programs, for example. I think that from this event, we have to decide together on how possible to integrate also the use of humanitarian standards, and also to do a monitoring on how are we changing the lives of these people who are affected by this crisis for a long time. I think also localization is a very good opportunity for now, but sometimes we're asking ourselves, what about our power as humanitarian organizations and as donors? How are we using our power? How are we involving communities when we are implementing our programs? How are we dealing with these communities? Are we more accountable to what they need? I think some of these questions are sometimes coming because, for example, from the context in DRC, when we have been doing contact with beneficiaries, they have been receiving humanitarian aid for a long time, but sometimes they say we don't have any satisfaction. We are not happy to see what is happening in our context because our needs are not really covered by humanitarian responses. This is for why we need to stay asking ourselves, how are we dealing with those communities? What about our power? What about our leadership? How are we using existing complex mechanisms for these communities on what we are doing as humanitarian aid? But also coordination mechanism is very interesting because we are talking about coordination mechanism, what is very interesting, but some other assumptions we are asking ourselves about the commitment of the government, for example. When we go to the humanitarian charter, the responsibility of delivering aid is not our work, it's the government responsibility. I remember 2 years ago when I was running a workshop related to fair standards with government authorities. When we talk about a humanitarian charter, one of government leader said, Jonas, finally you are doing our work. I said, yes, we are doing your work because you are not existing. I think that also engaging more leaders, more government, states, people, should be also an option to facilitate us as a humanitarian actors to ensure that after we are not there, governments should be able to continue doing humanitarian responses. Government should be more allocating resources in the government budget, for example. Our country doesn't have any humanitarian preparedness response plan as a government. Can we imagine? From experiences from COVID-19, for example, while we are also facing to armed groups with many displaced people, the government doesn't have appropriate policies regarding to civilian protection, regarding to responding to crisis. I think this kind of actions should be also be prioritized as a humanitarian community to ensure how possible we can push these affected states to be more responsible, to be more engaged in responding to crisis. My colleague was talking about cash, what is a very good model for response, but from many countries, doing a risk analysis is very interesting. Because I have been attending a coordination meeting with UNOCHA at my country level. We have seen that dealing with cash, sometimes cash is also bringing more risk to beneficiaries, more risk to people. I think that analyzing this context should be also very interesting to assure in which context do we need to choose cash model as an appropriate approach. It is depending. Lastly, I'm just going also to speak about accountability. I think that using local actors in promoting humanitarian principles should be one of more interesting priority, because my personal experience is that using sphere standards, for example, my organization was able to attend where many other NGOs cannot go. We use the humanitarian principle to negotiate access. We use the humanitarian principle to deal with armed groups, to make these groups more responsible also, to protect those humanitarian organizations who are coming to responding. I think that doing humanitarian principles, using humanitarian standards more local, with a localization focus on using humanitarian standards should be also a very good option to ensure that humanitarian response should be more qualitative and should be more accountable to communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonas. Thank you so much. You highlighted that we should not try and replace the role of government. It's the main responsibility of government to ensure people have enough humanitarian assistance. And you also said life-saving, but how long? How long, right? You highlighted more the areas that stretches our capacities as humanitarian actors, and not to try and replace us with governments. Thank you so much for your contributions. There was more in what you said, but I will need to go to my next panelist, and that is Diana Antir, experienced program coordinator with Caritas Moldova for the past 7 years, a dedicated professional with more than 10 years of expertise in child and youth education and development. She has broad experience as a trainer in the development and humanitarian sectors, covering both sphere, CHS, project management, and fundraising and communication. Diana, thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours. On how do you see the changes and challenges?
Thank you. If talking about Moldova, with a population of 2.5 million, the Republic of Moldova has hosted over 1 million refugees from Ukraine since February 2022, putting even more pressure on public services and increasing already existing vulnerabilities. In 2022, Moldova also experienced the highest inflation rate in the region at 28.7%, driven by rising energy prices and global supply chain disruptions. The humanitarian action in Moldova could not have been possible without international support. And now, with the reduced international funding, Moldova faces the challenge of responding to the growing needs with fewer resources. This increases the pressure on local resources and local capacity, and humanitarian actors are being pushed to prioritize interventions to reduce services and target the most vulnerable refugees. As if talking about localization, of course, it becomes more critical and important, and local actors ensure that assistance and protection are needs-based, community, culture, gender, and faith sensitive and contribute to sustainable solutions in the longer term. And local actors are able to respond to changing needs, but usually they lack the resources and capacity to do that without support. If talking about cash assistance, of course, this is a flexible and efficient way to meet the diverse needs of affected populations. It allows them to make choices according to individual needs and enhancing their dignity and autonomy. However, due to reduced funding, starting with April next month, the monthly cash assistance transfer value received by Ukrainian families living in Moldova will be reduced by 30%. And that means less food on the table, less education for children, less medical services, and poor ability to pay for gas, water, electricity, especially for the most vulnerable Ukrainian families. It's clear that humanitarian aid needs to go beyond immediate relief and focus on building resilience in Moldova. And the government of Moldova, along with humanitarian actors, local actors, including Caritas Moldova, is increasingly focusing on integrating development and humanitarian efforts, where aid addresses both immediate needs and long-term recovery. This is seen in the growing push for disaster risk reduction efforts in Moldova's humanitarian planning, and the refugee response plan emphasizes the humanitarian development peace nexus and the sustainable inclusion of refugees into national systems. Caritas Moldova, as part of Caritas Internationalis and Caritas Europe, is committed to support the most vulnerable ones and promote their dignity. Caritas Moldova is one of the leading national organizations in Moldova, was involved and is involved in the refugee response, delivering multi-sectoral humanitarian assistance. Becoming a sphere focal point in 2022 has allowed us to deepen our understanding of how to deliver effective and dignified humanitarian assistance. And we have integrated sphere standards across all aspects of our work, from shelter and wash to mental health and protection services. It should also be mentioned that there was very little knowledge about sphere standards in Moldova before 2022, and one can explain this by having no previous experience with an emergency of this scale. Once public and private actors got involved in the Ukrainian emergency response, sphere knowledge came all together with the international agencies and their best practices. Having access to sphere handbook in Romanian and sphere standards training facilitated by Caritas Moldova, the local actors acquired the knowledge, skills, behaviors, and attitudes necessary to manage and carry out their work with quality and accountability, ensuring that affected people have the right to assistance, protection, and a life with dignity in Moldova. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A lot of localization-related points were in your statement. And that's something that we really sincerely need to face again, but sincerely, that we have been talking about this for decades and not yet reaching to where we want to go. Let me go straight to my colleague Mohammed Adan Ibrahim, my last panelist. I'll give him the floor. Then I'll have a second question, but for 1 to 2 minute responses from each panelist in the second round. So Mohammed, with over 2 decades of experience in emergency management, is based in Mogadishu, Somalia, and born in Mandara district, Kenya. He had experience in both national and international NGOs, now overseeing programs and drive strategies to provide critical support and foster resilience in vulnerable communities. Mohammed, how does it look like for you in Somalia? How is yours?
Thank you, Alpa, for giving me this opportunity. First of all, I want to give you a quick review of the humanitarian context in Somalia. Somalia humanitarian context is complex and fragile that has been driven by decade of long conflicts and recurrent climatic shocks and weak governance, of course. The country is characterized by multiple armed actors that include the state actors and non-state actors. The state actors also have 2 categories where we have the central government forces and the federal states who are not answerable to the central government again. We also have the terror groups, the AS, we just say it in initials, AS. And then we have militiamen, clan militiamen, and also we have AMISOM. AMISOM is African Peace Mission in Somalia, and mostly they are from the neighboring countries, which sometimes they have that issues of borders that has stayed for so long. Then the funny thing is the federal government is only present in the capital city, Mogadishu, and few urban centers, meaning vast rural areas remain under control of non-state actors. So that leaves, that brings issue of humanitarian accessibility and service delivery, an issue, leaving vulnerable communities to food insecurity, displacement, and disease outbreaks. Having said that, also the climatic shocks, if I try to explain a little bit further, in Somalia, sometimes we also experience drought and flooding at the same time. The funny thing is that there are 2 main rivers. They flow from the Ethiopian highlands. So the natural flow of the rivers were being tempered by the Ethiopian government having constructed reservoir dams. Sometimes these dams overflow, leading to flooding in Somalia. While the other part of the country is experiencing drought, we can be also having flooding in the riverine areas. So it's a complex situation in Somalia. Then I go to the adaptation to this changing landscape. As organizations, it is time for donors and also NGOs to start investing in early warning system. By saying that, we say that we prioritize anticipatory action rather than we wait a disaster happening and you're all out there bringing funds when the disaster has already happened. So it is time we shift from responding, reactive response to early anticipatory action. So like when you have the meteorological department saying that they will be, especially right now in Somalia, we have not received the short rains in October last year, and the meteorological department has also forecasted that we will not be receiving the long rains, which we should start on April. So meaning that organizations need to prepare themselves early enough, rather than wait a disaster happens and now we are all scrambling over trying to save lives. So they need to go from humanitarian aid response to early warning anticipatory action. The other thing is for the multi-purpose cash transfer, as mentioned by my colleagues, I think it works well for Somalia. because with these non-state actors involved, like giving food stuff, distribution of food stuff, it involves a lot of risk. These non-state actors may come and confiscate all this food rather than going to the beneficiaries. It goes to the non-state actors, the militiamen or these terror groups. So it is for us, it works well, where a beneficiary can get food aid at the comfort of his bed. And there is the telecommunication system in Somalia called Hormut. You just register the beneficiaries, they verify, and then through the bank system, it is just one button, everybody receives the money at his comfort zone, and they buy whatever they want. The other adaptation is with the USAID cut, there is need for seeking new partnerships, especially in the private sectors, philanthropists, and sometimes also we seek donations from the Somali community in the diaspora. Sometimes they chip in to save the situation back in Somalia. Also, there is need to focus on durable solutions for vulnerable community members, shifting from short-term to long-term. By saying so, sometimes we say local problems need local solutions. Rather than people seated out there coming with designing a project to help people in Somalia, it is better we consider the inputs of the community and how they need to be helped. Why am I saying that? Because now Somalia has been without government for 30 years. All the NGOs are in Somalia. The situation has remained the same. So where are we heading to? So we need to rethink our strategies. Yeah. Then the other thing is localization. As my colleagues have already said, it is time the donors wake up and think maybe it is time we give the local NGOs chance to showcase what they can do. Being locals, understanding the complexes, the situations, and having accessibility to these inaccessible areas. I think it is time we shift our focus from just donors dealing with INGOs subcontracting the local NGOs. We deal directly with INGOs because by dealing with INGOs, we reduce the overhead costs. They don't need much expense or renting big offices, hiring expatriates, all those kind of stuff. And we can and we build the capacity of these local NGOs to an extent that the donors are more comfortable with them, and then you are assured of this money, 80% or 90% delivering service to the most vulnerable community that include older people, women, children, and people with disability, among other vulnerable communities. The other thing is, it is time we also.
Maybe one more minute.
Okay, the last one. The last one is, it is time maybe to streamline inclusion in all our projects, inclusion. Because there are certain categories of people that were being left out. As our organization here, though, we are also the focal partner for HelpAge International that deals with older people and people with disability. Thank you.
I have 20 minutes left. What I want to do is leave 15 minutes for questions. And I have to do something now. I have 2 questions for panelists, but I will ask kindly to one of them to respond to question 2 and one of them to respond to question 3. So question 2 comes for Kate, Jonas, and Mohammed. And it is about how your organization is adapting to what we have been hearing, what we have been seeing, and what emerging opportunities do you see for improving the wider humanitarian system? Among 3 of you, would one of you come forward kindly to respond to this question? How do you see the emerging opportunities and how your organization is adapting? Kate, Jonas, Mohammed. 1 or 2 minute response to this. I think you were all prepared for this question.
Are you asking one of us?
One of you to. Jonas?
Thank you very much. Kate said that I can begin. I think that as a national organization, there are many opportunities because the first one is the localization agenda is the very biggest opportunity given to us as national NGOs. But we have also to be strengthening ourselves to ensure that we have to benefit more from this localization opportunity. But also it's highly needed to defining new models and solution of funding. For example, locally we are trying to collect small money from businessmen, from private sectors, to ensure that we can be responding to crisis during the cut-off of funding. But also we are also more pushing to using humanitarian standards, especially sphere, as a power to give us also authority to negotiate access in very difficult areas. And also we are trying to apply CHS Alliance standards for accountability to ensure that those affected communities should be also more considered on what we are doing and how possible to improve the humanitarian assistance. Thank you very much.
And last question, as we navigate these complexities that we have been discussing, what should we prioritize in the future? What practices or approaches might be re-evaluated or let go of? And how can we ensure that we have a meaningful and sustainable change ahead? This is my final question, and I can ask this question to maybe the remaining panelists, Gemma, Diana, Mamdouh, and our keynote speaker, Louis. If I have time for 2 panelists to take the question for a response of 1 or 2 minutes. Again, how we navigate and what should we prioritize? This was in your statements, more or less, that you all alluded to, but just to highlight one last time in a few more sentences, how do you think we can prioritize and what are the practices and approaches we should keep or let go?
Okay, and yeah, I don't think we want to sit here in silence. So a couple of quick points. What do we prioritize? The most urgent cases of distress. That's why we were created. Let's focus on that. How do we do that? Locally led humanitarian action. Absolutely. It's more efficient, it's more contextualized, and we have to make this shift. We have not made the extent of that shift that we should. Cash, likewise, why did we hit a ceiling at 20-some%? I think we have to challenge ourselves on that and see what the future holds. And I think at the core of all of this, really getting ourselves back to treating the communities that we work in and with as the human beings that they are, and having that as our starting point. So accountability, absolutely critical. And the last point, what do we let go of? I think Kate touched upon it. The reams and reams of guidance. Just to give you one example, we looked across cross-cutting themes at how much guidance there was. There were over 2,300 pages of guidance on just 2 or 3 themes. There were hundreds of indicators that we expect people to measure. We have to challenge what really makes a difference, because to Mohammed's point, inclusion should be in everything we do. But it doesn't mean we need thousands of pages of guidance and hundreds of indicators. It just means we have to shift the way we work. The guidance and the indicators aren't that shift. So how do we make it happen? So debureaucratize, but enhance the quality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gemma. Do I have anyone else? Mamdouh, for sure.
I would like to add what Gemma said about one of the solutions is about the flexibility in funding. It's making like the open for the local organization to be participate in this like a big tender or the big call for a proposal from the state donors. Also for give the floor for the ground to design the project adopted the changes or the challenges that happening in the ground, and they can meet the needs directly in need, not taking a long time till the approvals come from the each quarter to the ground level. Second thing is about more working for the IHL, advocacy for the IHL, the genocide, what's happening, what's the breaks that happened. It's more working for the IHL. And the last one I would like to talk about is more investing in disaster risk reduction and climate adaptations, which is like it's saving resources, mitigating risk, and also ensuring the sustainability of life, not just our assistance. So that's what I would like to add what Gima said. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And apologies for the turbulence created in question 2 and 3. Now we have 15 minutes for questions. Otherwise, it was not going to be possible. Now we're done with questions that I will have for my panelists, and I will open the floor for comments, questions. I have first hand from you. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, and thank you for giving us time to ask questions. It's a very interesting panel as always. Thank you, Sphere. I think for me, like I was going to ask this question, but thank you, Gemma, for highlighting. I think the dispatch part I was missing throughout the discussion. We were talking about SAME, we were talking about reset. But when you said like dispatch the bureaucracy, I fully agree. Like that's all we need to dispatch of, I think, because focusing on quality is more important. I think our principles are being challenged. Humanitarian action is being challenged. Humanitarians are being challenged, and this goes before January the 20th. Like it's been happening for years, and that's why we've been trying to reassess, reconfigure ourselves for years to come. But the important role for us is to ensure that we toe the line on quality. And William rightfully said last year at the Asian PW that without dignity, there's no quality. And I think this is something that we're missing as humanitarians. And life-saving is not bad, you're right, but the way the donors and some of the states are defining it is. Because what it's pushing is for us to start counting trucks and go back to distributions without looking at the dignity of people. Yes, we need to prioritize the most vulnerable, give them what they need, but do it to ensuring that they have the dignity while they're doing it. It's not enough that you just provide items and stuff. I think my question is, how do you propose we get the messaging right? The funny thing is, we're fighting amongst ourselves. I'm like, oh, this organization is for life-saving, and this one is just, it's against life-saving. So what do we do next? Like, instead of us fighting about it, how do we get that messaging right? Where do these discussions need to happen so that when we say we are for life-saving, we mean life-saving with protection and with dignity in mind? The second question is, what actions have your organizations taken in terms of making sure that we don't deprioritize quality and dignity because of, politicized funding decisions, and of course the impossible pressure to do more with less, which I don't really agree with. We are already seeing some organizations removing references to gender, to inclusion. Thank you, Ibrahim, for highlighting inclusion, because we've seen organizations changing their websites. And I think this is a really, really worrying signal from us as agencies. Thanks, over to you. Sorry, Alan Kalma from the Lutheran World Federation.
Thank you. Who would want to take this question among the panel? Any volunteer? I am seeing Gemma. Kate? Go ahead, Kate. Yeah.
I'll be very brief.
The mic.
That's the mic, sorry. Yeah, no, I'll be very brief. So maybe to start with your end point about what we're all doing in response to the most recent shock. Certainly, we took a decision very early on as CALP that we would continue to emphasize our mission, which is choice and dignity for all people in crisis. So no stepping back from gender, no stepping back from inclusion, no stepping back from climate. All of those are, all key components of delivering choice and dignity for all people in crisis. As CALP, what we're trying to do at this difficult juncture is three things. We're trying to continue to advocate and make the case for cash. We need to make sure we hang on to what we've achieved in the last few years, notwithstanding that we need to improve it, but we need to hold our ground. So that's our kind of first point. Our second point is around cash solidarity. It's about supporting the community of cash practitioners, and particularly our very vibrant local organizations, our cash delivery partners, and convening them, trying to find solutions, making sure our material and training is available free online. So that kind of support to the community. And I think there's something that all of us can think a little bit about here. How do we support the humanitarian community through this very difficult difficult piece. And then the next thing is, as we've been talking about, the cash horizons, the cash reimagining. How do we build something and move towards something that's a bit different, which encompasses the principles that people on the panel have spoken to. So cash advocacy, cash solidarity and cash horizons is really what we feel is going to be critical for us in keeping us staying focused and not being drawn in a million different directions by the very sort of rich and vibrant conversations that are flying around. But at the end of the day, it's sometimes quite difficult to kind of absorb and you know, have the bandwidth to distill out from all of this what really matters. And I think that's probably a challenge for all of us. How do we make sense of all of these ideas and conversations and different perspectives that are flowing, and then really boil them down into something that we can all then focus on and move forwards with? So that, again, I think is a really important challenge for us all.
Okay. Any other reaction from panelists? I can keep you for the next if you
I just want to say a couple of words. Life-saving with protection and dignity, absolutely. And I don't think this is something that we need to debate. Just to put facts to it, we analyzed 19 humanitarian needs and response plans and looked at the life-saving objective only to see what was in there and to reassure you of the over 700 different types of activities. It covers everything from emergency livelihoods through to drilling boreholes where we need them. So we have come a long way as a humanitarian community. Let's not doubt ourselves. When we talk about life-saving, we're talking about life-saving with dignity, with protection, and where protection, again, just to reassure you in this reprioritization moment, where protection was separated out and given a unique strategic objective in a country context, we said, look at that too. And as we saw every humanitarian coordinator submit, protection was there. So I think part of this is to trust ourselves. Part of this is to trust the work that we have done over the years, not to say that we're perfect. We're not. We're very far from perfect. We all know that. But we've come such a long way. So let's not fight amongst ourselves. We know that life-saving means life-saving with dignity, with protection. We know that. Let's stand true to that. Let's speak to that. And let's not have others define life-saving for us. Because I 100% agree. It is not about trucks. And what is the thing that we have seen in every single crisis of the last years, especially the most complex? In Tigray, we counted trucks. In Gaza, we count trucks. Everywhere we count trucks. And in a panel I was in recently, it was closed door, so I won't cite the specific panel, but someone said, and it's really powerful, you can't load protection on a truck. So we know that. Let's stand true to how far we've come. Let's be confident in how far we've come. And let's say that life-saving is life-saving with dignity and protection. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well said, Gemma. I had one hand in the back and three in the front. And then I think that, and then last one, if we have time. Yes, let's start.
So I just wanted to highlight a golden thread that came up from Jonas, but from a few others, that when we say localization, we're also talking government, we're talking governments, and we need to be breaking governments down, thinking about disaster risk management, social protection. And my question to you, to Kate, I feel that when we're talking cash transfers, the fourth reason why cash transfers are so crucial is because they are the biggest bridge to the nexus with social protection, and that's kind of strongly demonstrated. And to everyone I ask, how are you engaging and thinking about social protection in the reset or dispatch? Thank you. There's going to be a session on this, localization through social protection, this afternoon. I forgot to say. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone has any reaction? Or it was taken as a comment?
I think that social protection is the responsibility of the government, but as also a national NGO, we are trying to push, to advocate, to meeting with government to ensure that government has also to take responsibility. So as an NGO, we try to connect with the government, institutions, doing advocacy, talking to them. We are promoting FAIR and other humanitarian standards. We promote the humanitarian charter with government leaders. And we have been distributing some sphere handbooks also at the country level to ensure that authorities should be taking their responsibilities. And for now, I was also trying to discuss with some people from the government, those politicians, to ensure that they can be sometimes also bringing on the table when they are in the parliamentary meeting, how possible to discuss humanitarian issues, how possible to integrate also preparedness and response plans at the government, so that can be also helping these authorities to take their responsibility and to protect communities. Thank you.
I just want to add one thing. So I think one is we've been coming back, as Jonas just said, repeatedly in recent weeks. As OCHA, we're created by General Assembly Resolution 46182. And the first piece of that is that the primary responsibility to assist victims of disaster is the government. So I think that's clear. And Jonas said it far better than I will, so I won't repeat it, but just that we repeat that responsibility always. However, and it is a big however, one of the things that we have been looking at a lot is why are we in certain countries for such a long time? Sudan has the longest running consecutive appeal on the planet, 32 years. Somalia, as Ibrahim said, is more than 20 years of humanitarian appeals. When you look across those countries, DRC, Jonas, the common factor is we have significant parts of the country that are controlled by non-state armed groups. And how do government systems support, enable, ensure that people's needs in those areas are met? That's a fundamental challenge. And it's very interesting, even when you look at what people are saying in reprioritization, you can see this tension playing out. And I won't say the country because it's confidential, but that we had a country submission looking at reprioritization that said, if we were to assist the people who are most severely in need, they're in the areas that are controlled by non-state armed groups. That's not the priority for the government, which is either returns or people who've remained in government-controlled areas. And we need to find the way to strike that balance. So I just wanted to put on the table that reality, that most of the places where we work for a long time, where we bring value as humanitarians, are places where you have that fundamental tension. And so how do we navigate that in the right way? Thanks.
Thank you so much. I have 3 minutes left, and I have one hand from here next, and then if we have time, okay, one there left. Yes, we have with you. And I'll come to you if we have time.
Thank you again for everyone's comments. It's been a very constructive panel so far. My name's Sian White. I work for ELRA in the UK Humanitarian Innovation Hub. And my question is, how can we perhaps leverage the kind of superpowers within both research and innovation to most constructively and creatively and strategically address some of the big challenges and opportunities that you've raised today?
Me to take one more question and then see who wants to respond to what. Sir, your question.
Thank you very much. My question is very simple. As many of you really work with cash transfer things, and there are some challenges, and new challenges are coming up. Because if you really go to the remote area, the commission also going up. That is one thing. The other thing is that so many registration is needed, the birth registration and other things needed for having the cash transfer through the cash transfer agencies. So how you really meet up those challenges, and any idea about it? Thank you.
Thank you. 2 questions we have, and would anyone want to respond to any? Mamdouh, and then Kate for the cash maybe? Yes.
I will answer for the innovation. One of the examples, it's really, I put it like one of the biggest case study for me, it's the innovations that we happened in some of remote area in, actually in Syria. It was a lack of equipment materials, and even for the maintaining this equipment because of the regulations and the sanctions that happened. So a lot of materials not going to Syria. So the part of the innovations is to make the innovation labs and hubs inside and support the local local engineers to find the solutions for this big equipment that will save lives and support the beneficiaries. So it's the innovations is a part of like the preparedness. We can work more in the preparedness and the digitalizations and innovations apps for any kind of preparedness. At the same time, like give the floor for the field team to innovate with their interventions, give them more spaces and the main materials to have like the solutions in the ground, not relying just on the like equipment that coming from outside or that taking long time till the arrived. Last thing is about the support the entrepreneurs that always they have critical solutions, part of their innovations for any problem, especially the social enterprises that always addressing a very important problems in the community and solve it by the innovations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mamdouh. With you, Kate.
Yeah, no, I'll be very, very, very quick. I mean, I'm trying to bring the two maybe together. I mean, I think, of course, there are challenges in getting cash into very, very difficult places. I'm not naive about that. And of course, there's sometimes we won't be able to do it. So, I mean, just to be very clear on that. However, I think where we are finding in many different contexts, and very difficult contexts, it is possible. And I think what we need to do to answer the research question is to try and really bring to life the local innovations and the kind of networks that are being developed around these very, very different contexts and find out why it's working, how it's working, and be led by local solutions, because that's how we're going to find our way around very, very different contexts. We can't find a global model that's going to fit these very challenging contexts. So starting with what's happening, building on the local innovation, building on local knowledge, building on local systems, and then finding solutions in that way. So research that's basically focused on local solutions, I think, is a way of bringing that together. And as I said, there are many places that we can learn from, whether it's the Somalia example, the Sudan example, or places further afield. So let's find those solutions collectively and distill out from them the real kind of gems that can help us in figuring this out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. We are concluding. One final word.
No, it's tiny. I want to double down on what Kate said. I think often when we talk about innovation in the humanitarian sector, we're talking about data and technology and everything else. What has worked in the most complex crises of the last year? The emergency response rooms in Sudan, the soup kitchens in Gaza, that's the innovation of the humanitarian sector. So how do we flip this on its head and acknowledge the innovation that is mutual aid and solidarity and communities working with communities, rather than thinking that for humanitarianism, innovation is data and technology? Thanks.
Thank you so much. We conclude our panel with 4 minutes delay, and I apologize from those. There were a few more hands, but I couldn't manage the time. It was great to have 6 panelists and one keynote speaker. I was in a panel yesterday where there were 3 panelists and 90 minutes was not enough. And I was concerned this morning how I'm going to manage the time. But 4 minutes delay, and I had to expedite one part of the panel. But thank you, everyone, for joining. Thanks to my panelists, and a big applause for my panel, please. Thank you.